The case of Gemma McCluskie is proof that no matter how cherry pie a person's life might appear to the outside, how normal things might seem, you never know what kind of demons are running around behind closed doors. But Gemma wasn't just your everyday neighbor. She was a beloved part of English media thanks to her role in Britain's most notable family TV show's long-running history, EastEnders. She was loved and cherished. Every moment of her life was spent caring for those around her. If she'd been given enough time, Gemma was going to make this world a better place. There's no doubt about that. But no, her life would be cut short in such a brutal and public way that it overshadowed even the biggest soap opera in Britain. No amount of drama on EastEnders could compare to the brutality that Britain was about to be introduced to. Here's the story of Gemma McCluskie, ripped from the world by her own flesh and blood. Let's get into it. Gemma McCluskie was a funny, happy kid that was always the life of the party. Her personality stood up well against her two older brothers, Tony and Danny. Unfortunately, Gemma's mother, Pauline, was diagnosed with a brain tumor during Gemma's formative years and contracted a pretty serious infection during treatment, resulting in her being almost completely housebound. Not that you'd ever have thought that anything was amiss when meeting Gemma at all. She kept the bright side up and never allowed her smile to falter. Thanks to her involvement in drama clubs at school, Gemma got her first break on the comedy TV show No Sweat, a tale of a high school boy band struggling to get to the top while combating teen angst and high school bullies, namely a vicious tyrant by the name of Janice, played marvelously by a then 14-year-old Gemma McCluskie. 3 years later, Gemma became a series regular on the wildly popular EastEnders, playing the part for a whole year. For those not living in Britain, EastEnders is the British version of Days of Our Lives. Many young aspiring actors can say that they've been in at least one episode of the fast-paced soap opera. So to be a regular for more than a year, well, it's a pretty big deal and a very solid paycheck to count on. But that was it for Gemma in the acting world. Her mother's declining health needed her attention more, so she started working in the clubbing sector of London, bartending, waitressing, and event planning, perfectly placed for her to be close enough to home in case she was needed during her working shifts. Again, she fit right in. During this time, her brother Danny grew up and moved out, leaving Gemma and Tony still at home. But the family were incredibly close, and between Danny and Gemma, their mother could at least remain in the comfort of her own home, surrounded by her children. Between the two siblings, they devised a pretty streamlined schedule so that someone was at Pauline's side at all times of the day. You might have noticed that Pauline's care relied on two of the siblings and not all three. That's because Tony, then aged 35, had a long history of drug abuse. He'd been in and out of jail for possession and other petty crimes, but none of his previous offenses were ever violent. Tony was the family's disappointment, heading nowhere and seemingly with no intention of getting his life on track at all. Days would go by where they didn't see him, and all he did when he was home was eat, sleep, and leave a mess behind him as he went. Gemma and Tony fought a lot. Her growing frustration and disappointment in his lackluster approach to life and his regular disturbances, stumbling home to scream and shout at everyone in sight. Let's just say that Gemma's patience was wearing thin. At 27, she'd put her entire life on hold for the mother who needed her, yet it was her 35-year-old brother who was taking up most of her time, and he wasn't handling it well either. Tony resented Gemma for her role as leader of the home, the responsible one who fixed problems, took care of everyone, and that naturally got more respect than the oldest sibling could ever dream of. He made no secret of his resentment of his sister, yet she was always the one he called first when he messed up again. With all of this boiling over in the background, Gemma attempted to go on with her busy life. On the 29th of February, she attended the grand opening of the Royal London Hospital to film her friend's young daughter, who was set to perform at the event. The next day, on March the 1st, Gemma attended a get-together at a friend's house. The party was cut short for Gemma, however, when she received a phone call from her brother Tony. From Gemma's heated exchange, her friends were able to discern that Tony had attempted to run himself a bath after smoking copious amounts of weed. He'd forgotten about his intended bath, probably to raid the fridge or pass out on the couch, flooding the whole flat. Gemma was beside herself with anger. Not only was her mother's bedroom upstairs, the damage was going to cost her, not to mention that she'd probably have to clean up this mess all by herself. Gemma's friends tried to convince her to stay, but she knew that if the situation was left to Tony to clean up, it would only make it worse. So she left early and headed home to douse yet another one of her wayward brother's disasters. And then Gemma went quiet. The social butterfly who spoke to her friends every day was silent all night and the next day. By the end of March the 2nd, several friends were already worried about her. So they called Gemma's older brother Danny. He headed over to the house, but Gemma wasn't there. And Tony hadn't seen her since the overflowing bath incident. She hadn't clocked in for work that day, which was highly unusual. And all of her possessions were still in the house. Most concerning of all, Gemma would never leave the care of her mother over to anyone but Danny if she planned on leaving the house for longer than a shift at work. And even then, she'd prepare all of her mother's medications and meals ahead of time so that Pauline could be taken care of with minimal effort. Danny was understandably worried and terribly frustrated with Tony, who wasn't too concerned about any of it. But he dragged Tony over to the police station anyway to report their sister missing on the 3rd of March. Naturally, Tony, who had been the last to see Gemma, was immediately questioned, not as a suspect, but as a witness to his sister's final confirmed movements before her disappearance. Tony was barely able to string 2 sentences together, let alone give investigators any straight answers. But for now at least, he was just a perpetually intoxicated drug user, and not a very bright one at that. Tony came off as more pitiful than dangerous, and his abysmal recollection of events was chalked up to his excessive drinking and long-time drug use. He did confirm that he'd flooded the flat, called Gemma, and that they had a pretty big fight because of it. He stormed off to his bedroom and passed out. At 6 o'clock the next morning, when he woke up, the flat was cleaned up of water and Gemma's car keys were in the kitchen and her car parked in its usual spot, but Gemma wasn't there. So he assumed she'd gone out to finish her party and just decided to spend the night with a friend, which would be highly unusual for Gemma since she'd never leave the care of their bedridden mother over to Tony overnight. Gemma's disappearance created a firestorm. Former and current actors on EastEnders banded together to raise awareness. Her friends handed out flyers all over London, and several news stations plastered her picture on TV. Gemma was recognizable enough from her previous roles, and so incredibly loved by her friends and former colleagues, that she became the nation's sole focus overnight. The hashtag, #FindGemma, was all over social media, and Danny, at least, was inconsolable. Tony, on the other hand, was not out searching wooded areas and alleyways like his brother was. Instead, he lounged at home, lighted one bong after the next. He hadn't changed his routine of waking up and getting plastered until he eventually passed out at all. Unfortunately, Gemma's disappearance also encouraged several pranksters to get in on the action. Though prankster might be the wrong word here, the brothers received several phone calls demanding £2 million for Gemma's safe return. The caller said that she'd been beaten, assaulted, and locked up in a dark room. The call was traced, and the 18-year-old delinquent making the calls was arrested for his sick prank. And this kid wasn't the only one leading investigators down dead ends. With all of the media attention now focused on the family, Tony finally made an appearance, though his attempts at joining search efforts was lackluster to say the least. His lack of interest in his missing sister didn't escape their notice, but without any evidence to link him to any wrongdoing other than being a complete waste of space, they couldn't do much about their suspicions. They focused instead on looking into his past records, and they told a much different story than the picture they'd had of a stoner that rarely bothered to do much more than smoke and roam around in his underwear. In the last 2 years, Tony had moved on to skunk, a derivative of marijuana that's laced with all kinds of chemicals. This isn't the usual kind of wacky tobacco that most smokers use to unwind after a long day. This stuff is highly addictive, can cause auditory and visual hallucinations, extreme paranoia, and yes, violent outbursts fueled by sudden bursts of uncontrollable rage. Gemma and her ill mother had called police twice to intervene when Tony had psychotic episodes. Both times, he throttled Gemma with enough force to leave her with long-lasting bruises around her neck, and both times, she hadn't filled an official police report, opting to give her brother another chance to clean up his act. According to Gemma's friends, however, it had come to the point where she was going to kick Tony out of the house completely if he didn't seek help or if he messed up again. To say that they were itching to get into the house is an understatement, but without further evidence that could prove that a crime occurred, there was nothing they could do at that moment. Then, on the 6th of March, 5 days after she was last seen, a barge operator made a grisly discovery in the Regent's Canal. The woman was sailing a barge through the narrow passage, and her craft hit a floating suitcase in the water. The knock made the suitcase pop open, revealing a headless torso inside. Gemma's head, legs, and arms were nowhere to be found. Yet. Now, this was murder. Authorities had probable cause to search the home, but before the search warrant even came through, the CCTV and cell phone records were released, and things got even worse for Tony's case. The call between Tony and Gemma regarding the flooded bathroom occurred just a little after midnight. Gemma left the party as evidenced by CCTV and arrived at their apartment complex shortly after 1 in the morning. Her car was seen pulling into the driveway, and 18 minutes after arriving, her phone was switched off. 3 hours later, Tony had called a taxi and was caught loading a suitcase into the trunk before getting into the back seat. The taxi dropped him off close to the Regent's Canal in the early morning hours. Tony then took the suitcase, dragging it along the sidewalk for several yards, before CCTV lost track of him. An hour later, he returned home and didn't leave again until Danny arrived looking for Gemma. The taxi driver was located, and he confirmed that it was definitely Tony who he'd picked up with the heavy suitcase. The trunk revealed traces of Gemma's blood. A student who was out on her balcony also saw him drag the bag down the street in the early morning hours. On the 7th, Tony was officially arrested while the search of the house continued. Authorities allowed Danny to take his mother out of the house with the help of medical personnel. She just had major surgery and was too unstable to be moved unless professional help came in to assist. Pauline, unable to speak after the operation, could only mouth the words no over and over again, silent tears streaming down her face when Danny had to tell her that their beloved Gemma was dead. The search revealed droplets in the bathroom, and a knife from the kitchen had traces of blood on it, all coming back as belonging to Gemma. Tony had cleaned up remarkably well. For the first time in his life, he'd done a good job of something, if you can call murder that. According to CCTV and the cell phone being turned off, he would have spent 3 hours dismembering his sister with only a standard kitchen knife. That amounts to a great deal of blood, effort, and quite frankly, the only place he could have done such a thing without making an enormous mess would be in the bathtub. Yet there was no trace of blood in the drains. Only one part of the bathroom counter showed any other traces of blood. They were sure he'd used some kind of barrier, probably plastic bags taken from the kitchen, to catch the mass amounts of blood that would have been spilled. A week after the arrest, a diver found Gemma's legs wrapped in plastic bags in the same canal, and further down, her arms were located. It took another week before her head was discovered. Gemma's cause of death was 2 massive blows to the head, though the object that would have caused it was never recovered. That's when Tony started talking. According to his version of events, he and Gemma had gotten into a big argument over the flooded bathroom. Tony was in the middle of attempting to scoop up water when Gemma attacked him with the knife from the kitchen, and after that, he couldn't remember what happened at all. Keep in mind, he had no wounds on his body, and he'd spent more than 3 hours dismembering his own sister, wrapped each of the 6 body parts individually, stuffed them in a suitcase, called a cab, and then went on to dispose of each individual part separately by weighing them down with rocks. That's a lot of calculated thinking for a man who had a memory lapse, not to mention the fact that he returned home and did a remarkable job of cleaning up the scene after that too. Amazing how much a man who'd never lifted a finger to help himself or his struggling family could accomplish when he was afraid of getting caught, isn't it? Gemma's remains were stored until all of her body parts were recovered. Her brother Danny refused to hold a funeral until all of his sister's remains could be found. The funeral was further delayed to allow Pauline to recover from her surgery so that she could attend her daughter's burial. The procession of attendees was enormous. Dozens of current and previous actors on the EastEnders cast, all of Gemma's many friends and her family came to pay their respects. Then there were the hundreds of fans that showed up too. The church didn't have enough room for everyone, so the crowd gathered alongside the street and quietly followed the procession to the graveyard when the service ended. Pauline lived long enough to see her wayward son be found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. She died a year after Gemma's death. According to Danny, she just never recovered after that surgery. The will to live just left her after Gemma died. Gemma's story is one we won't forget, and one we shouldn't. If you believe in keeping these stories alive and seeking justice where it's due, especially when the victim was one that only sought to better the lives of those around them, then give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more cases like this, and let's talk in the comments. Keep the conversation going. If we stop talking about it, the victims and their abusers' crimes will be forgotten.